You're listening to The Disconnect, a podcast about anxiety and how it disconnects you from your normal self. We're here to share our journey and help you through yours to show you you're not alone. And now, your hosts, Austin Grant and Lindsay Jones. Welcome to episode 7 of The Disconnect. For those of you who have been following along with us, welcome back. If you're just tuning in for the first time, we're glad you're listening. In previous episodes thus far, we've covered what anxiety has looked like for us during our childhood, how it manifested into high school, what it looked like through college, and our experience with anxiety once we graduated college. Then we moved on to the times where we both endured the worst bits of anxiety we've ever faced, and ultimately why we decided to make the podcast. In the most recent episode, we discussed the importance of mindfulness and our experience with that, especially this past year. Today, we kind of want to recap 2019 and talk about the new year. And so 2019 as a whole, kind of what we're most proud of and what was the hardest part. So, Lindsay, what are you most proud of in 2019?
Man. 2019. There are a couple things. That definitely come to mind. The first one being starting this podcast. I think that's been pretty huge. It took us so long to plan the podcast and eventually launch it. And I think that it's been one of the best things that has come out of 2019. Like, I absolutely adore this podcast. I love everything that we're doing. I love all the ideas that we have. I love that, it gives us a chance to do good in the world. I mean, what we say on the podcast can help people. Like, our experiences we can use to just kind of help people, and people who may be going through things that we've gone through or things that they're going through that are a little bit different. And another thing I think I'm proud of is that for the first time in probably 5 or so years, I've reached this point in my life where I'm financially stable. All the stuff that happened with my mom, everything that happened with my brother, I've worked really, really hard to get to this point, and I realized the other day that I've paid all my bills on time. I don't have to worry about paying my bills. I have a system. I have all of these things, and I'm finally in a place where I'm financially stable, and it's an amazing feeling to not have to worry about oh man, I can't pay the electric bill this month because I have to buy groceries. So it's been a pretty great year, I think. Overall, it's definitely had its ups and downs, but overall, I think we're going into 2020 in a pretty good manner. How about you?
Definitely most proud of my experience from this past summer and what I learned, and how it led into us creating the podcast and what it's become. Getting engaged, pretty huge. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, kind of with what you're saying in terms of the financially stable piece, Jess and I are kind of we took that financial peace course and we love that, and I don't know, it's just it's clicking, and it's we have a plan, we have our budget figured out, we have things in the work to prepare for emergencies and things like that. And so when we're getting these paychecks and setting aside money for our little trips we did, we went to the football game, we did this, and so setting aside money for that and not having to be oh shoot, just slap it on another credit card, not doing that is, it's liberating. And so kind of how we've really been more intentional with our budget and where our money is going, I think that's helped out a lot. But yeah, the podcast for sure, probably one of the biggest highlights of this year, just because it's such a fun thing to do. It's a newfound passion. And my entire life I've always been one of like, oh, sports are my hobby, or playing drums is my hobby. But now it's like this podcast kind of serves as that hobby now, and I enjoy doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty neat. So what was the hardest part?
There were kind of a lot of aspects that were really hard. I think one of the main ones is balancing of all the things that I'm doing in my life. So I don't have a very good memory to begin with, because, traumatic events will do that to you. But I think managing my time between work and school and the podcast and starting this entire business, like the fact that we are a business entity just it carries so much weight with it. And so it really makes sure that the podcast is important, right? Like it's something that I wanted to spend my time on, but now like I feel like I'm like financially beholden to it almost. And so it adds like that extra weight of importance to it. And just managing my time between, having a personal life, hanging out with my brother, hanging out with my family, or doing schoolwork and being at our regular jobs all the time, and then making sure that the podcast is running smoothly and we have everything we need to do for that, and expanding our business has been really hard, and it's given me a different kind of stress that I haven't had to deal with in the past. Like I've always been in school full time and I've always worked full time, but I'd never really had like a third thing. Like when I went home after all of that stuff, it was just I did homework and then went to bed, or I played video games and didn't really do anything productive, right? But now I have something else productive that I really, really enjoy and I love. And it's kind of been hard managing my time between all those things. Like I've definitely felt very, very, very stressed during certain pieces where I'm like, I have to go to work, I have to go home, I have to do my homework, and then I have to go like record a podcast episode later, or I have to go do this other thing, or somebody asked me to watch their house, and I'm like, man, I have so many other things I need to do, and I want to help that person out, but I can't because I don't have time to do that. So it's been an interesting experience. I think that's probably one of the hardest parts of 2019 was definitely adding this third aspect. Um, but I think I've handled it pretty well. I think I've managed to, got an A in the last class that I took, and I think I'm doing pretty well at work, and I think our podcast is going really well. So I think overall it's been a good difficulty, but it's definitely been difficult. How about you?
The hardest part was probably in the summer again, when I first realized what was going on, and then sitting there through those coffee shop chats and stuff, like hearing you talk about all these things that are working for you, and you're finally getting a grasp on all this, and me sitting there like wondering when I'm gonna figure it out, or like I don't know. I mean, it just seemed at that point in my life it was so hard to find the light at the end of the tunnel that seemed like it would never end. Like I was like drowning. I had no idea how long I'd be like this, and it was like this hopeless feeling, and so that was really hard getting through that. And I mean, what felt like forever, it was only a span of maybe 3 months. But I mean, through that, it was super difficult, even just like we've talked about, getting up, getting out of bed, finding the motivation to get up and go to work. I mean, get up and go do things that are productive, and in the midst of being in a master's program and going to work and coming home, like on top of all that time management that I was already struggling with. I mean, now I was like carrying that weight and dealing with that, so it just made it 10 times worse. And so that was probably the hardest part for sure. But I mean, with that, like we've talked about, I mean, it's incredible how much I've learned and how much I've grown and the things I'm doing now that I wasn't doing 6 months ago. And so, kind of leading into our next piece, this past holiday season, kind of want to maybe just talk about, what our anxiety looked like over the holidays between Thanksgiving and Christmas. The holidays tend to bring a lot of stress. You're around family members that you may or may not get to see throughout the year, and there's all these expectations and things that society has placed on you. Oh, you got to get gifts. You got to do this. You got to get, all these advertisements on TV to go out and buy a $50,000 car. And I'm just like, that would be nice, but I don't need that. And so we kind of wanted to transition into like what our anxiety looked like these past 2 months or so. And so what would you say, I guess, first off, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your anxiety the last month and a half or so?
The last month and a half. So that's kind of a hard question for me to answer, because my anxiety, I don't feel like all of my anxiety is created equal. So like the anxiety I have around like going and visiting family, or, having to cook things over the holiday, or having to like get things ready or buy presents for people and do all that crap, is not the same as the anxiety that I feel about spending another holiday without my mom. So those are two very, very, very different levels of anxiety. So in terms of like the anxiety I felt around like, going down and visiting my dad and Deb, and then the anxiety I felt around like making sure that my brother had a good Christmas and had like good time off, and that we spent it productively, and I got him presents, and we were just taking care of each other. Like that anxiety was probably like, I don't know, maybe like a 5 or a 6. It really wasn't that bad. Compared to past years. Like I realized this year, and this is kind of going to sound a little dark, but being around other people's family members during the holidays really reminds me of how thankful I am that my family is so small. I really don't have a lot of family members. Like I do have some extended family, but we don't really talk to them. We don't really see them during the holidays. Ever since my mom passed away, and even kind of before that, like we just kind of had a falling out with that side of the family, and we've tried to patch things up, and I think we're okay now. Like if we saw each other on the street, there wouldn't be any animosity towards each other, but we just don't like talk to each other. We're not really that close. And I just found myself like being around your family. Like your family is great. They're so kind, and they just like, they're so loving, but like not having had dealt with that in a long, long time, it was very overwhelming. So being, around them is a little bit overwhelming. Like I can handle it, but it stresses me out because everybody's around and everybody's doing all their different things, and it stresses me out. So like stuff like that stresses me out. But the anxiety I felt around my mom not being here this year, because it's been a good 5 years since she passed away now. Or, well, yeah, 5 years. And I actually think this has been the best year so far for that. It was still like a 7 or an 8 on that scale. Like, it still sucks that she's not here. Like there are things where like I want to tell her about the podcast. I want to like, tell her about my job. I want to get her advice on things. I want to, share with her the life that I'm creating. And I can't. But this year it didn't hurt as bad as it normally has in the past. And I think that's just because I've gotten to a point where I'm far enough away from it to where I can start remembering like the good times, and just being like, yeah, it sucks and it's something that you have to deal with, but I can't like keep letting it drag me down like I have in the past. So yeah, so two different kinds of anxiety around the holidays, I think, for me.
Yeah, I like that you differentiated it a little bit. I think for me, the last month and a half, 2 months, it's been that kind of that you stress that everybody talks about, the good kind of stress that comes from planning things and like this year, we went down to Jess's parents' house for Thanksgiving, so we knew that time was going to be with them, and then Christmas time was going to be with my family, and so planning those two, separating those two. Um, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, the Thanksgiving break, we had a nice time down there with her Phoenix, with her parents in Phoenix. And I mean, I was pretty anxious just because that was the time I was supposed to, or that's the time I was um, asking her dad for her permission or for his permission, and thinking of all the scenarios and stuff that could go wrong, or him saying no and her finding out, or the list goes on. And so that was primarily my like where my anxiety was during that time. I was trying to have a good time, enjoy the time off, and spend time with her family. And so once I finally kind of got past that, I was like, okay, it's on to the next phase. Now I gotta, I got a couple more weeks until we're doing this thing. And so with Christmas, my family was coming up, and so amidst trying to plan this proposal and then just having my family up here, having the Christmas dinner at my house and everything, it was something, I've always wanted to host a Christmas with my family, and so it was such a great experience being able to do that. But on the opposite side of that, planning all this food for, this many people, and when it's just Jess and I normally, we're just making meals for two. It was a huge shift, and so stressing out about all that, making sure everybody else is having a good time, and making sure that the things that we're doing in town, making sure everybody's having a good time, and that this Christmas is definitely one for the books. And so something that originally I was anticipating a lot of anxiety and everything, it just ended up, panning out as it always does. And we had a good time, and then we got to the actual proposal, and the weather and everything caused us to have to change the plans a little bit, which is totally fine and what we had kind of expected. And so once that finally happened, I mean, it was such a relief. I mean, not having to keep that secret anymore, not having to divert her attention whenever she's asking me and stuff. And so I think a lot of my anxiety the last month and a half or so was just, okay, how do I avoid that conversation without making it seem too suspicious while having my family here? And so there's kind of a lot going on. And so it was a big Christmas for sure. And so it was nice having everybody up here. I mean, the weather was great. I loved it. And I think they really had a good time. And I mean, just having them there, for the engagement and everything was super exciting. And now that it's here, and it's happened, it's like a weight off my shoulders a little bit, and it's an exciting time, to end the year off, especially this year, what I've accomplished, what I've overcome, and what I've dealt with, and how I've grown. And now to cap it off, with this, and, things are kind of starting to fall into place. And Jess and I are really, like, I'd say we're a lot happier than, than we were, like, when we were just stressed out all the time, not really having a plan, not really, sure with where we were going, in terms of like careers and school and things like that. That was all bogging us down, but now I think we kind of have a clearer picture, and so it's pretty nice to be able to end the year on that. And so I'd say definitely excited for what 2020 has in the store. Speaking of which, with the New Year's right around the corner, figured the next topic we'd like to kind of discuss is New Year's resolutions. And so, with that, I mean, there's tons of topics around okay, well, how long do they actually last? And is it possible to make them work? So, how long would you say they actually last? In your experience, or just what you've heard, how long would you guess?
Oh, not long at all. Maybe like, I think people probably quit within the first month. I think like they get to where they're like, "Oh yeah, I can stick it out." And then, they get through like the first couple weeks and then things start to get hard cuz after the holidays you kind of go back to your regular normal routine, and then you kind of get complacent with that. And I think probably by the end of January, beginning of February, I don't think it lasts very long. I think maybe a month.
Yeah, so an article from the Business Insider states 80% of New Year's resolutions fail by February.
There you go.
And so, I mean, that leads to the next question: is it possible to make them work? And so, another article by author Peter Economy states that around roughly 8% of people who make New Year's resolutions actually achieve them by the end of the year. Yikes.
So I think that that's interesting because I think people start the year off with such good intentions. Like a new year really feels like a blank slate at first. Um, until you start falling into your bad habits, right? So you start saying like, "Oh, I'm going to say you want to go to the gym more, right?" And you start going to the gym, and then you start getting to where it gets harder to maybe make time for the gym because you start having more plans. Or maybe you're working more and you're focusing on work and you just kind of fall back into those bad habits. So I actually found an article from the American Psychological Association that actually talks about, and we can definitely post this on one of our social media platforms, that talks about how to actually make a resolution stick. And so it says the first step is to start small. And what they're meaning by that is if for example, your aim is to exercise more frequently, schedule 3 or 4 days a week instead of all 7. So make it a more manageable task, right? So there's that old saying that says like you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So you have to go slowly. There's baby steps involved. So really starting small really allows you to set more achievable goals, and once you reach those goals, then you can start adding maybe more goals on. So once you make it to 3 days a week, then add to 4, and then add to 5. Kind of like we were talking about with mindfulness, right? Like you're not going to be good at it in the beginning. And I think recognizing that in yourself and setting smaller goals will help you be more successful throughout the entire year. Then it says change one behavior at a time. So I think a lot of people think like they start thinking about the new year and they think like, "Oh, wow, I'm so out of shape," right? We'll stick with the same gym mentality because I think that's a pretty popular one. I'm so out of shape. I need to eat healthier. I want to live a healthier lifestyle. So they start changing all of these things about them. They start going to the gym regularly. They start, they start doing meal prep, and they start counting their calories, and they start really focusing on, the kinds of food that they're eating, and they just change too much at once. And so this says unhealthy behavior develops over the course of time, thus replacing unhealthy behavior with healthy ones requires time. Don't get overwhelmed and think that you have to reassess everything in your life. Instead, work towards changing one thing at a time. So, kind of like we were saying before, eating an elephant one bite at a time, pick one thing and stick with it, and change that one thing. Make that one change in your life. And then once you master that, add something else onto it. So you don't by any means have to change everything else up at the same time. Just stick with one thing. And the article goes on to talk about talking about it. So it can really help. And Austin and I kind of found this, which is what started this podcast, is that when he was going through something difficult and making a new change can be difficult, it was easier to talk about it. with somebody, and get somebody else's perspective, and have somebody to kind of act as a sounding board for you. And so talking about it can really help you to stick with the change that you're making and to commit to it, because now you have to be not only accountable to yourself, but accountable for somebody else who might be checking in on you on those resolutions that you're making. And then the next thing says, don't beat yourself up. I think this is another really important aspect of making changes for the new year. Like 80% of people fail their resolutions by February, which 80%, that's like a horrible amount of people are failing. Like, that's so many people. Like, if we had 80% of students failing out of high school, we'd probably be pretty concerned about what high school is teaching these children, right? And so looking at that, like, don't beat yourself up the first time that you fail, because you can be your own worst critic. And for me, at least, like, when I fail at something, it's really hard for me to kind of get past that. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of figured out, like, taking my time and recognizing that failure is okay, and that it's just a minor setback. Just because I didn't go to the gym one day, or just because I didn't eat healthy one day, doesn't mean that the entire plan has gone to ruin, right? And then the last aspect is asking for support. So kind of going back to the whole talking about it thing, if you have somebody else who wants to make the same change as you, so for example, if you have a friend who also wants to start going to the gym, go together, be each other's support system, be accountable to each other. We just started this thing in our office where it's a 2020 challenge, and it's a healthier version of you challenge. Shout out to any of you listening to this, because I think it's going to be really good for our office. But we're all kind of challenging each other to be healthier in 2019, and holding each other accountable as well as ourselves accountable. So we'll post this article somewhere, I'm sure, if you want to take a look at it. But I think that is a good way to kind of keep those New Year's resolutions.
So with that, figured we'd dive into some of our personal New Year's resolutions, and then after we could kind of talk about some resolutions, or more so of some goals we have for the podcast in 2020. But to start, what are 3 New Year's resolutions that you would like to achieve this next year?
I think the first one is going to be that I need to do more art. My personality is a very creative personality. Like, I absolutely love creating new things. I love the creative aspect of our podcast. I love drawing things. I love painting things. And I realized recently that I haven't done that a lot in the past couple of years. For whatever reason, I just didn't have time, or didn't have like a space to do it in. And so the other day, I actually, somebody gave me a gift card for Christmas, and I went to Michael's and I purchased a new set of watercolor pens, which I absolutely love. And it's really reminded me of how much I love drawing, and I love painting, and I love creating new things. And so I think that's one of the main ones, is going to be to create more art in the space around me. Another one I think is going to be, it's going to kind of sound silly, drinking more water, because I feel like I drink an okay amount of water, but I definitely could drink more water. Like, I feel like we live in the desert, so I need to probably drink more water.
We live in the trees.
It's a high desert, okay?
I wouldn't say that.
Oh no, it is. You should ask somebody. There's cactus around here, my friend. And then I think the last one is going to be being more gentle with myself in times of stress. So I beat myself up really, really badly. Like, I am my own worst critic, like I was talking about before. I have a really hard time with failure. And I think I just need to be more kind to myself. Give myself a little bit more grace when things don't work out, because even when things don't work out, they do work out at the end, right? So, for example, there were some things that were not really going well with the podcast when we first started. We had a really hard time recording our first episode, and it was so frustrating. It was so like we didn't know how to fix it. We didn't know how to solve the problems, and it was so frustrating. And I was beating myself up because I didn't know how to fix it, right? Neither of us knew how to solve this problem. And eventually we figured it out, and we just, cuz otherwise we wouldn't be here today. um but during that time, I was really hard on myself because I couldn't fix it. I couldn't find a way to fix it. I couldn't Google a solution because I didn't know what was wrong. Um, and so I think I just need to give myself more grace and just trust that things are going to work out the way that they're supposed to.
Your resolutions are so unique. I feel like two of mine are very basic.
That's
First
okay. They don't
one,
have to be complicated like mine. I'm
the
just a
first
complicated
one
person.
is I would like to read a book a month. Those of you who know me, I have never liked reading in my entire life. But since this summer and kind of, just doing different things and spending more time, being mindful or really just unplugging and whether that be drawing or whether that be reading or whether that be like journaling or anything else I've done, I think I've just come to learn that reading is important and it's essential to just growth and development, especially as we're developing this podcast, the entrepreneurial side of things in this world. Like, there's so many things you can learn out there. And so I've kind of really just want to challenge myself a little bit more and take something I used to hate, still partially hate, but like kind of push myself into that and try that because I know good things can come from that. And so that's something that I want to challenge myself, reading one book a month. And then another thing, I want to play the guitar more. And so I've played drums in the past and I'll still continue to play drums. But specifically with the guitar, it's kind of something I, picked up like 4 years ago and, learned the basic chords and then kind of just stuck it at that. Never really had time for it, nor made the time for it, and so kind of just sat in my corner. And Jess just got me a guitar for Christmas, and so I really want to kind of press more into that because, like you said, like that creating piece and the artistic side to you, and I find that in music. I think it's fun to make music and play music, and in terms of when I'm myself, when I'm not stressed and everything. Like, I think it's so fun to just to create music, and it would be cool to just learn some more learn some more songs and just get better at it as a whole and start to play more. And then the last thing, as I start to think of these things or the circumstances that caused me to dig myself into this hole this past summer and get to the point where it was so hard to pull myself out. I don't know, I think I've just been more intentional of the things I'm spending my time on or the stuff I have. And so with that, I would like to kind of adopt more of this minimalist lifestyle in terms of so we have this podcast, and we have so many things that we're trying to do. And so with that, if I'm letting myself, or if I'm sitting there spending way too much time on social media and things like that, those are things that would lead me down the path to where I was, and it would cause my anxiety to be, worse than it's ever been. And so that minimalist idea in terms of cutting time on social media is something that I really want to focus on this year, as well as eliminating some of that negativity in my life. Just the people that you surround yourself with, or just the stuff that now that I'm looking back and piecing together kind of the months leading up to the summer, it's like mind blowing how the red flags were all there. But at that time, I was not, like, I was so oblivious to what was actually going on around me, and I was just following people and just, doing things not for myself. I was doing it to please people, or because I felt like I had to, or because I felt obligated, or things like that. And so through that, I think kind of being more intentional with my time like that, and spending more time doing things that add value to my life, like this podcast, and like the reading, and then playing the guitar more. Those are things that I enjoy. So yeah, I'd say those are my resolutions for this year for sure.
I really like that. I especially like the book reading one. I love to read, but I feel like I don't have time for it anymore, which makes me sad. Maybe I should join you in your one book a month. Maybe we should start our own book club.
Frank's Book Club.
We should do it. We should totally do it.
If you have any book nominations, please let us know. I prefer the easy to read books with not a lot of pages. Notice I didn't say how many pages. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, if you have any books, there's a lot of great books out there, so let us know. And we'd love to hear from you. And so with that, kind of want to move into some, I guess not resolutions, they're more of goals for the disconnect.
I think a resolution is a goal of a kind of. Yeah, I think that's what a resolution is, right? I have a goal of drawing more. You have a goal of reading more books. I think a resolution is a goal.
So the resolutions for the disconnect for 2020. First goal, we're shooting for a follower goal of 2,000 on Instagram. Pressing hard on Instagram, and we'd love it to be able to reach that many people on that platform by the end of 2020.
I think our next goal is going to be a total of 2,000 downloads. Maybe we should get some context on how many we already have. We have about 520 total downloads for our podcast right now, and we want to get to a total of 2,000 by the end of 2020.
Moving on, we'd like to set a patron goal. So, as we've mentioned in the past, we started a Patreon to help, or to allow you guys to help support the podcast, some of the monthly expenses and things like that, between balancing full-time work and full-time school stuff makes it really difficult with these monthly expenses and stuff. And so the Patreon really helps support that and allows us to spend more time creating the content and getting it out to you guys. So our Patreon goal for 2020 is at least 10. Yeah.
Another goal that we have is going to be, we want to actually start uploading videos to YouTube. How we're going to do that, when we're going to do that, what we're going to do in those videos.
TBD.
To be determined. We don't know yet. But we would like to achieve that by the end of 2020. We have some ideas, but yeah, we're We're working on it.
And speaking of ideas, if there's anything you guys would like to see from The Disconnect or see us doing in 2020, please let us know. We're open to suggestions and feedback. And I mean, this is all a learning experience for us, and we really want to utilize this podcast to its fullest potential and help us reach as many people as possible. And so with that, all this talk on resolutions and these lovely statistics on how not successful people are always sticking to it, we wanted to challenge you guys to think about ways to set resolutions that are focused towards improving your mental health. And so an article from Metro.com provides 10 New Year's resolutions to look after your mental health in 2020. And so we'll link this in the description, as we'll also link it in our social media platforms on Instagram and Facebook. And so just to kind of give you a brief synopsis there, the top 3 of those 10, number 1 being limiting your time on social media, number 2, going to bed earlier, and number 3, everyone's fun one, cut down on drinking. Drinking is bad for anxiety.
We say on New Year's Eve as we're about to go open a bottle of champagne.
First drink in many months. But yeah, so there's 10 ways to set resolutions for mindfulness. And so we really want to challenge you guys to take a look at it and see which one of those fit with you and something you really want to challenge yourself, and then let us know. Keep us in the loop with how it's going or things you're struggling with or whatever. We'd love to hear about it and talk through it a little more, whether that be on the podcast or just reaching out through email or DMs. We'd love to help you guys out. We're definitely going to challenge each other to stick to some of those things. I already mentioned limiting time on social media. So Lindsay's going to, make sure I'm sticking to my word and not allowing myself to get consumed with that. And so with that, as always, we would like to end each episode with a quote. And so Lindsay's got today's quote. It's a really great one.
So today's quote says, "You must take personal responsibility. You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself. This is something you have charge of." And it's by a gentleman named Jim Rohn. I really like this quote because it really, in terms of changing things and making New Year's resolutions, the onus is really going to be on you. So you can have all of the best laid plans for making resolutions and sticking with them, but if you are not committed to those at the end of the day, you're not going to stick with them. If it's not something that you are passionate about changing, if it's not something that you really feel as though it will benefit you, it's not going to stick for you. And so really realizing that you're the only one who can change the circumstances that you're in is going to help you in the long run to be able to stick to the goals. Like the quote says, we can't change the wind, we can't change the seasons, we can't change the march of time. And so being able to utilize every day to the fullest extent and take charge of the time and space that you're currently occupying, you'll just end up being a better person in the long run, because you only have the amount of time that you have right now. And if you're not utilizing that to the best extent that you, to your best abilities, then maybe that can be a New Year's resolution for you.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this quote too, as this past year, summer 2019, I mean, it was something I couldn't change. I couldn't change that season I was going through or really anticipate or do anything about what I was going through other than accepting it as something that I can grow from, as well as changing my perspective and how I responded to that. And so instead of me just letting it bog me down and hold me captive for the rest of my life, so to speak, I took action and I practiced something, self-care and the mindfulness and the journaling and a bunch of other things that I did, something that I have control of and something that I can change about myself was my routines, my habits, and it was incredible how much it helped. And so going into 2020, I definitely want to take personal responsibility and continue to pursue these things and do things that are going to add value to my life and really benefit me in terms of my mental health and my overall well-being. And so we really, we saw this quote and we figured it was perfect for the overall theme for today's episode, with the new year coming up. And so we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We would love to hear some of your guys' New Year's resolutions and what you guys are most excited for in 2020, whether that be personal, or what you're most excited for from the podcast in 2020. If there are any quotes that you guys would like to share, please let us know. We'd also love to hear your story. Go ahead and DM us on Instagram or Twitter at Frank Disconnect. We're excited to get to know you all and continue this journey into this new year. Be sure to send any questions or suggestions to askfrank@frankdisconnect.com. Give us a follow on Spotify and iTunes, as well as hitting that subscribe button on YouTube. And we would love it if you'd leave us a review. That helps us be able to reach more people. And lastly, don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/frankdisconnect. Thank you all for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Disconnect.